Okay, I'm going to get started. I'm going to call study session to order. It is 4 o'clock. And our first topic here, pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101B, council will be going into executive session to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood to increase price. So we will go into an executive session. City manager, how long?
30 minutes.
30 minutes. So we will come back at 4:31. How about that? Yeah.
Oh, we're going out there. Yes.
I was headed up to the diocese.
Yeah.
Okay, council has returned from executive session. This is regarding potential purchase of a property. Looks like we could consider action here. So, council, let me hang on a second. I'm looking at my paper. This is in regard to 907 Pioneer Street and the parcels there. So, council, I would entertain a motion if there was one to take action to authorize the city manager and staff to negotiate purchase of the property.
Mr. Mayor, am I on? Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I move to, what are we doing?
Move forward.
Thank you. Move forward with allowing the purchase of 907. Yeah.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to move forward with the purchase of 907 Pioneer Street. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, the motion carries. The city manager is authorized to move forward with that. This will still come back to council, correct, city manager?
What will come back is the funding source for that.
Sure.
So the purchase and sale agreement has already been authorized, and that was authorized in a previous action. This is the formal action to authorize the purchase, and then the funding source will come before you in
Correct.
the budget amendment.
Okay, great. So funding source will still come back to council. Thank you very much. Okay, we can move on in our study section. The next item here is the Ridgefield Community Recreation Center. Mr. Stewart, we'll go to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council and community, I am going to ask that our consultant group come forward and join us here. Do we have room for all y'all? I think we do. I think we have 3 of them. If you gentlemen don't mind, we'll just put we'll just have the row here, or move over to the other side, sir. If you guys move over there, then we'll have them all sit on this side. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. Mayor, council, community, thank you very much for having the study session with us this evening to receive a progress report on our Community and Recreation Center. Before we get started, I wanted to make sure our consulting team and our project manager have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So, gentlemen.
I'll go first. I'm Durgesh Patel. I think I've met you guys a couple times. Project manager and been on this since 2020.
Stephen, if you could use the microphone, please, just for people online. Yep, hit the button, it'll turn blue. There you go.
I'm Stephen Black. I'm with Ada Architects. I'm project manager for Ada on the project and working with Durgesh.
I'm Carl Johansson, principal in charge of this project. Stephen Demurd, he's also a partner at the office.
And this is the project team that has been doing the lion's share of the work between the last time we came before council and tonight. And the last time we came before council was in March of 2024 for a public conversation about status and next steps. And before we get to that point and moving to now, just a little bit of a history lesson on it. The project history started with a goal. And the goal was that as the city of Ridgefield grows, there was a need that had been created in the community and assessed to build a hub that provides space for recreation, connection, and belonging. This was something that was initially brought forward from council in 2015 and then started being formally evaluated in 2016. In 2016, there was a market feasibility study for that kind of space. And it was conducted in partnership between the city and the YMCA. An external consultant came in and showed that there was a very high level of interest regionally and certainly locally for a new Ridgefield YMCA, with 13.5% of all households in the survey area expressing a great deal of interest. Now, 13.5%, is that a lot? Is it not? A national average for that is about 4.5%. Expressing a high level of interest. So very high level of interest in this type of amenity in our area. And if you look at it, when you look at the kind of the desert of these types of amenities in North County and throughout from Hazeldale North and east, you can see why there was certainly such a desire for this type of facility. So council then directed staff to work with the YMCA and to work with other potential project partners on such a facility. From 2016 to 2019, there was work to identify property and funding strategies for that. Through all of that, work, finally, about 3.5 years into it of looking for something, city property was identified in the location that we are all aware of now at Discovery Drive and Pioneer Canyon Drive. Is it Discovery Way? Drive. It is Drive. I get that wrong. Discovery Drive and Pioneer Canyon Drive, just north of Pioneer Street, where we see the job trailers now from ACI for the widening project. So that property was identified and actually expanded to be a little over 10,000 square feet for the purposes of a community and recreation center there. Not only did we identify the property, we identified a potential private-public partnership with Blue Rock Ventures, represented by Durgesh Patel, the YMCA, and the city. That was memorialized in a letter of intent. And the idea being is that there'd be a public-private partnership where the city would provide the land and help with some of the design. The YMCA would build a building, or would actually manage a building and be a tenant, leasing that property from Blue Rock Ventures. So a true public-private, similar to what we have completed with the TMI building and the Bluffs down here in downtown, where we have a public-private partnership on that, where we lease with an option to purchase that space. So that was the original concept in 2020, memorialized with a letter of intent. In 2021, design phase began. Design phase began with the city taking the lead on the design for the land side of it, the site, the YMCA taking the lead on the design for the building. Both the YMCA and the city working with ADA on that. 2022 were the first renderings. That was when the first pictures come out. The pretty picture that people saw first, that was 2022. So roughly 3 years ago were the first renderings of a 50,000 square foot facility with 43,500 square feet of recreation center as part of that. The other square footage was seen at that moment, it was deemed for a future tenant. Not sure what that was going to be. It wasn't a community center at the time. It was an idea that maybe there would be a private tenant that could take up that extra space. From 22 to 24, there were design modifications to address cost and functionality concerns. Then in March of 2024, we came to you in this room, and City Council directed staff to move forward with an amended development concept. And that would be a building similar to what the community and council saw in January of 2022, but with two legally separate but functionally seamless assets, such that there would be a recreation center that could keep to approximately a $20 million threshold, which was identified by the YMCA as a key threshold point, and the city paying approximately $10 million for a community center asset. To reach this goal, the City Council authorized contracts with ADA and Blue Rock Ventures to complete the design and permitting, readying us for construction. And that brings us to today. Now, these two slides I threw on there just as a reminder of the goal and what were those assets, what were those things that the community said that they really wanted. Adult fitness, women's programs, family activities, programs for children, an indoor warm water facility pool, group exercise studios, a wellness center. Those were kind of some of the key assets that came up over and over again as being a key determiner of success for this project. And then that's how they built, that's ultimately how the consultant at that time, this was in 2016, 2017, that's how they built a 50,000 square foot facility. So that's where it started, was that 50,000 square foot facility. It's gone down and up, and we've seen the iterations over time, but we're not gonna focus on those, because we're gonna focus on where we are today. So there was 22, there was the pretty picture. I think we've all seen it, our community's all seen it, and that's where we started, as far as the pretty pictures go. This was the overall design of it. On the south side of that is Pioneer. East side of that is Discovery Drive. On the north of it is Pioneer Canyon Drive. You see the natatorium with the two pools, warm water and lap pool. You see the gym, the fitness, the Y time, the kids areas there. And then you see potential other tenants. You can see a PT tenant and a future tenant. Those were the unknowns in that have since shifted to a community center. And then floor plans, go ahead. So then we fast forward to March 2024. So we came back to you in March of 2024 with a 43,500 square foot facility. Close to that 50,000 square foot facility, reconfiguring to make sure that we were tightening up what was used for the recreation center space, really looking to maximize the use of the space and the assets contained within, working with the YMCA to get their managerial experience on it, but also working with Ada and with Blue Rock to figure out what are the best monetized assets that can be created, and then also the community center being added to this. And on this rendering, the community center is on the right side of the picture there. We are looking north from Pioneer in this picture. So that was March of 2024. That was the last time we came to you and where we started for our design work. Floor plan, like I just said, you look at a community center as the yellow on the left there, and then recreation center being the rest of that, two-story design with kind of almost a daylight basement approach to it. And at that time in 2024, as we talked about before, the hard costs we were looking at were approximately $30 million total, $10 million for a community center, $20 million for a recreation center, and then with soft costs and contingencies, bringing that to approximately $35 million. So, from 2024 to 2025, a lot of design work has been done. Through that design work, there's been a lot of identification of, all right, what are our cost drivers? How do we actually deliver a 43,500 square foot building? How do we actually do that within the site? How do we maximize the potential for the asset and at the same time minimize the costs? In March of this year, it was determined that with the configuration that you just saw, that the cost, instead of $35 million, you're looking at a little, almost $41 million. Now, there are a number of reasons for that. The biggest reason, though, and once you have questions about this, and Mayor, I would say, feel free at any point, as you as a council want to interject, please do. You don't have to wait until the end of this, but it's up to you on that. But we also have experts that can help us with those increased costs on that. So they brought those and said, all right, here are some of the increases we've seen in costs. The biggest cost escalator was the site work. If you look at the site work alone is over $8 million. That is a huge, huge number and is certainly more than what was originally anticipated. The biggest reason for that is the site elevations themselves. It is a sloped site. You have habitat, critical areas, wetlands surrounding, and you have a slope that you're working within. So when you have to build retaining walls, you have to build into the hillside, you're having to do a lot of work on the site to actually manage the critical areas and manage the slopes to make sure that you actually have a stabilized site to work with for the building. So with the configuration you just saw, that was the biggest piece that our project team came in and said, this is something that is driving costs up. Then the question becomes, what can we do about that? What are the things that we can do to actually lower those costs and bring it back down to that $35 million threshold that we were looking at? Yeah.
For site work, just curious, since that area is now the temporary home for the project team for the Pioneer widening, has their presence there had any positive or negative impact on what kind of site work might need to go into when get to this stage?
It's a great question. I was pushing the mic over to Mr. Patel because there have been a lot of conversations between our project manager and ACI, so
Yeah.
I'll turn that to you.
Yeah, definitely. I'll talk a little bit about that and see if you want to add some color. So we did look at some of the early work that we can do, and the type of soil that's there unfortunately can't be reused in a nutshell. And so I'll let Stephen kind of add a little bit more granularity there, but from a high level.
Yeah, so we did, like Durgesh is saying, we worked with them to see, is there anything during the road work that could benefit our work on the site? We weren't able to identify anything, but I would say their presence on the site as far as their trailers and all that, it's a neutral impact. It's not positive or negative. It didn't help us, it didn't hurt us either. So.
Okay. So this next slide is actually just to break it down between community center and recreation center. As we have been looking at this as two assets, the city looking to ultimately create, fund, own an asset, a community center as we used to have downtown, and that has been kind of a missing link in what we have as a community. Since that point, that community center we had anticipated at approximately $10 million being the investment. You can look at that piece of it and say, okay, well, what is the overall cost by square foot of the community center and versus the recreation center, but then the site work is separated off from that. So it was just a way for us to look at it and say, all right, relative, just based on square footage alone, what are the relative costs for each one of those assets at this point? So that was when we were at that higher dollar point and we needed to get back down.
Just for my own clarification, the site work being the biggest impact on costs going up, is that we just didn't know what we didn't know at the time, and now researching it's far more involved than
I think that's a lot of it. When you get to, we were at 30% design. Last year when we were showing those renderings, we were at approximately 30% design. And when you're at that level, you know, you've done some preliminary analysis, but you haven't done a lot of the really detailed geotech work and environmental analysis to show what the impacts and costs are of a specific design. So from 30 to 90% design, which is where we are and where I should have started in my presentation of this, is that you get a lot of that detail together. And what I should have started with is that we are at that point where we are close to 90% design, and we are seeking input from council on that design and where we are now, so that as we are finalizing design and moving into our permitting processes and readying for construction, that we are all on the same page of what it is that you are seeking to accomplish and to build. So that is the purpose of this conversation for this evening.
I may have missed this. How many square feet will the community center be?
The community center is about 8,000. If you look at quantity on the left side there, so the quantity you've got, or is that right? Yeah, so the quantity is 8,000. You have roughly 35,000 square feet for the recreation.
So this project is a couple years behind for all intents and purposes. You know, it seems like we probably should have been through construction and close to opening if everything gone originally as according to plan, right? So if we had been on the original timeline with the original $30,000 identified construction cost, what?
30 million?
30 million. Sorry, yeah, sorry. Yeah. If we would have done that, is this the kind of thing, the site work and all of that, would we have encountered this and would we be now looking back and saying, whoa, that was a 20% cost overrun, if not more?
Yeah, so let me answer that in twofold. One, yes, you would have found this earlier. This is not something that time changes any relevance to. You would have found it. Secondly, I think the only other advantage you would have had is construction costs would have been a lot different during a couple of years ago, which actually was COVID, and that number would be significantly higher.
Yeah.
Because we had to go through all the supply chain issues. So now we're at the trailing end of it. And walking into Q4 this year, as the economy and the construction gets tightened up, we get to take a little bit of advantage of that as well.
Okay, so with that in mind too, as we look at where we're at in 2025, and You know, if you look at things like there's new tariffs going into effect on steel and aluminum, right? Things like that, construction costs are going to continue to go up. What don't we know right now, or what can we anticipate for future costs, and is this going to continue to escalate? I know there's a slide in here about the timeline here. Are we going to be looking at another 20% above where this is at right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, Stephen and I were just talking about this outside in terms of what they're seeing, what I'm seeing in the field, and we just talked about this, is that this timeline actually meets our needs because all of the tariffs we're hoping to anticipate is done by Q3, Q4 this year. And when that's all done and the kind of the noise has kind of been tolerated, well, the supply chain will kind of work its way into the steel and the commodities like the wood. Right now, that's our concern. So breaking ground in the next 90 to 120 days are problematic for the subs. I think walking into end of this year, we'll have a pretty good idea about the cost stability. And this is a cost estimator's good pass at it, right? And at the end of the day, I think we'll have a better idea as we go through DDs as well.
Are you saying that if we wait till towards the end of the year, because we're expecting costs to go up, you're not saying they're going to go back down?
No, I'm not. I'm saying all the volatility will
Okay.
be over by the end of the year.
Right,
And so
okay.
we'll have a better trajectory.
And
then.
we'll have a better idea of what the actual cost is going to be, but it's probably not going to be in the $35 million range if
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, what's happening right now in the field is more like the prices that are coming most of the time when we get our bids, they are good for 30 days. Right
Yeah.
now, the bids are good for about 3 days because the prices are not locked in. And hence my timeline about the Q3, Q4, things will stabilize by then.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Council, any questions before we move on? Okay.
I've got a comment. Site work will go down because there's a lot of big projects and a lot of contractors haven't got a lot of bids in the pipeline. They can see where things are backing down, and so they're going to get more competitive than what they are now today. I mean, that's my prediction, only me. But you might have other avenues to check on. But what I hear out on the street, the projects in the pipeline aren't like they have been in the past. And we've felt the same thing with some of our projects that we've bid and come underneath the bid. So it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse because there are some people that are conscious of the other costs, and so they're pulling. We have some businesses that were coming to Ridgefield and have pulled their interest.
Yeah, and we have talked about that. While some of the material costs may continue to increase, the bid environment is more competitive because there are fewer projects in the pipeline, and so both public and private projects are down. So there are fewer of them. So the bidding environment is more competitive, and the bids are coming in lower. And we've seen that in our own bid environment already, and the expectation is that will continue. And as contractors are seeking to fill their books for next year, for 2026, the expectation would be is if we hit this in this timeline, and we'll go through the timeline, but if we hit this timeline, then there is at least some reasonable expectation that with the competitive bid environment that we should get some good bids in on this. So while materials may be up a little bit, there's a lot of other toggles that they move to actually lower the overall bids. I think Councilor Davis had some.
Yeah, and I mean, my understanding is a lot of this is talking about sort of the design piece. What I haven't really seen as I've, I'd looked through it before, and I mean, we're referencing an 8,000 square foot community center. I haven't seen mock-ups as to what would be in the 8,000.
We'll get there. It's in here.
Okay.
I promise you.
The
It's
inner
about
guts?
7 or 8 slides later, and then we're going to be talking about exactly that.
Okay, okay.
So stay tuned. Let's go to the next slide. Because let's get to that, because a lot of this is about design, but I do want to make sure that we answer all your questions. So when we were talking about the cost, because we are doing two things, we're updating you on the cost and on the design. So on the cost, when the project team looked at the cost overruns of approximately $5 million, the question became, what could we do to actually amend those costs, bring them back down? So a couple of key things were evaluated. And the first biggest thing is actually reconfiguring the site and having the building direction, the building orientation changing. And with the building orientation changing from the natatorium facing south to the natatorium facing west, There was a significant savings by creating a longer entry drive that allowed parking grading to be dropped, reducing the amount of import to the site, and actually changing the retaining walls, lowering the actual number and sizing of the retaining walls throughout the site. I don't know if you want to talk about the other savings associated with the reorientation, Stephen.
Yeah, the biggest savings is really just dropping the finished floor elevation. So when we had it oriented east-west on the south side of the site, we had a really short entry drive, which meant that the street elevation was driving the floor elevation of our building, which was raising it up, causing us to bring in a lot of fill. So by reorienting the building, you can see we have a much longer entry drive, which allows us to drop that finished floor elevation to take more advantage of the natural grade on site, which allowed us to reduce significantly the amount of import we were bringing in, which also allowed us, because we weren't filling up so much of the site, eliminated a lot of the retaining walls we then had to add to retain that fill we were bringing in. So not only did we reduce the amount of fill we were bringing in, we also cut back on those retaining walls.
Okay. So we'll go to the next slide. You can see the price tag for all that. So if you look at the move building location and reduce earthwork, that saves about almost $2 million on the project estimate just from that alone. Now, there were some other things that the project team looked into that Durgesh, Stephen, that they all brought back, that Carl brought back to take a look at. And some of these you've already seen. It was a longer list, but shortened to those that had the best potential benefit to save funds without hurting the overall functionality or aesthetic of the building itself. So reducing roof overhang somewhat, a little bit. We were looking at a bigger reduction, but then ended up not. There was HVAC system reductions, building separation, redundancies, which was something we can save because there was a concern about having the two assets and some of the redundancies necessary. We were able to eliminate those. Removing a fitness studio was actually one of the actual pieces that had a functional change to it. It was a 1,700 square foot fitness studio. It was actually a second-story fitness studio that was over some, like the pool equipment room. And it was one that was separated off from the rest of the recreation area. And so it became almost superfluous. There was a question of whether it would even be offices or a yoga studio because it was kind of separated off, so it didn't make a ton of sense. But that alone saved almost another $1 million by removing that. When that was removed, though, there was an opportunity created with that roof space that when the mayor and I toured the Eugene YMCA facility, one of the really interesting features that they had was an outdoor fitness area that was covered, had a rubberized mat surface, and it was attached to the recreation area. And from all their accounts, 12 months of the year, it gets good usage, even though it's outside, because people use it to just lay their yoga mats out and stretch. They go out there and do a little bit of work, but they're doing it so they can kind of spread out and be outside of the workout space that is more active and where people are moving around it. So they got good usage out of it, and it's a really low-cost way to create an active space. So we were able to replace the indoor space with that and save almost $1 million. And then the last one was a balcony at the gym and reducing the gym area. Now, reducing the gym area sounds a little bit like we're trying to make a smaller gym that's undersized. That's not true. It's reducing the gym area by a very little bit on the outside of the gym area to reduce the square footage a little bit. How many feet?
I don't recall.
It was like a couple. No, I mean on each side it was a couple feet.
It was like 2 feet each side.
So like 2 feet each side, and so it just tightens the area outside of the gym space. And the balcony was it was an aesthetic balcony. It was an aesthetic balcony that hung over the gym, but didn't actually have a purpose or a function to it. It was just there for aesthetics. And again, taking that out was significant. It was about $750,000 of cost reduction. Mayor Pro Tem.
But is there still a fitness studio?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, the fitness studio didn't change size, the gym didn't change size, like we didn't make a smaller basketball court because of it or anything like that. So it didn't, when we were looking at these cost reductions, the idea was what can we do that does not diminish the functionality or the assets that are contained within the building. So what could you do that no one would miss is basically the gist.
Okay.
So, overall over $5 million change. So now, with those changes, we have an amended design that shows us we're now looking from the southwest, looking northeast to the building. The natatorium is on the left side of the screen. The natatorium is that larger building, the same roof structure that we saw before. Architects get creative, and instead of green, now it's brown, and they do some different things. I need to hear about this. Like, go back a couple of slides, 3 slides. More. There. So there's green, there's natatorium. So you're seeing that kind of from the natatorium's angle on that. Now go back to where we were. So now you can see there's some differences in that. Like, yeah, give me some immediate thoughts. So Councilor Davis is like.
No, I'm just trying to square, I'm still back on slide 13, like looking, because that doesn't.
This looks very modern though.
It does look, I like the, yeah, I'm not complaining about the looks of it. I'm just thinking that like, trying to figure out
Where things are?
where things
Okay,
are, like the
so-
elevation. I'm just on 13 where it's showing like the building footprint and the parking lot and then the main road. And I'm thinking like,
Go to the next.
if I'm southwest, that's
Is that the one you're looking at?
beautiful. No.
That's not the one you're looking at.
No.
Okay, so again, I'm looking from the southwest, looking in the northeast. Go to the next. Go back one, just so I can show you. So natatorium's on the left
That's
side of this picture.
East. So I should be looking at this. So where's the
No, because this is Discovery Drive right here.
Yeah.
This is Pioneer. This is facing towards Royal.
Okay,
Is that what you're
I
asking?
think that's
hold on. We'll get to slide 13, and I think we can answer that for you. So on this slide here, natatorium's on the left side of this, right? And then you see you see the room there, like that's kind of in the little wedge area. That's the supply room. On the roof of that, that's where we'll have the covered area and actually have the external. That is connected to the fitness area. The fitness area is the area you see on the right side of that. And especially on the second story of that, a lot of that is the fitness area looking out at those windows. One of the things that we learned when we were talking to the Eugene YMCA director was when people are on a treadmill, when they're on a bike, they want to be looking out. They don't want to be looking at a wall on it. And so very important to make sure that there are transparencies so that people are actually able to get light, to be looking out over that. So that is the fitness area that you're looking at on that level. The first level is where you have the locker rooms and those aspects of it. And the natatorium itself is a 2-story tall, much higher. Go to the next. Is this the one you were looking at, sir?
No, I was.
All right, then let's go to the next one.
earlier up. Yeah, no, it's fine.
Is that the one?
No, it was none of them.
It was none of the-
I was stuck on an earlier slide.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I got it figured out now.
All right, so we're looking from the southwest, but not from very much from the southwest to the northeast, basically as you're entering the site. So as you're entering it, I'm on Discovery Drive, I'm coming north, I'm to the YMCA, I'm getting ready to park, and then I have the recreation center, or excuse me, the recreation center that I'm looking at, and then as I go toward the west, as I'm looking at the building, going left to right, that's where the main entrance is and where the community center is on that other side of it.
Yeah,
Keep going.
yeah, okay.
There's a little more close-up of that, and you start seeing, like, all right, I've entered the site, I see the main entrance, you see that tall, the 2-story on the right side of the picture, that's the kind of the grand entrance that we have to the 2 facilities, into the community recreation center. So that's the grand entrance that you would have there. Tall, grand, a drama to that entrance point. This, now I'm looking from the northwest, looking to the east. Now this is looking straight at the natatorium. So natatorium, 2 stories tall. On the right side of it, on the left side of it, that's where I am now looking at the community center aspect of the project. We're kind of just working around the building. As we're going around that, and Councilor Davis, are we answering the questions of where things are yet on this?
No, yeah, I've got that figured out.
Okay.
I was looking at like the bigger zoomed out footprint and trying to see what spot on that, what direction is it looking, and just having it make, it was just
So so now we're outside looking at, we're gonna go inside the building here very quickly. As we're looking at the outside, what are like comments, thoughts, ideas as far as the design of this that you would like to see? Because again, this is our point where we're asking for your help externally and internally. What are we hitting the marks on, and what do we need to keep working on?
I'll say that I like the finish that is kind of rendered here as opposed to the green or yellow that was there before. When I first saw it turned, it was kind of like put it back. That felt kind of weird. But now that you see it, like I think if this is facing, those big windows be facing west, correct? And I think that's like if I'm on a treadmill or if I'm doing or if I'm looking at those windows or whatever, I think it's a much better view than it would be looking at a busy roadway. So I actually really like this.
Other, sir, yeah, we're open. So yeah, whatever,
So I'm thinking about, and this is a use that I will have personally when it opens up, people riding bikes to the facility. If they were to take in the main drive, which I would expect that they would, and coming in, do we have like bike parking closer, or are they going to have to navigate through a parking lot, which is always a little not ideal?
Yeah, so you're correct. They would have to come in down the main drive, and then right at the main entry, we have bike racks that they can lock up and secure their bikes as they go in the facility. So they'd be going in the same main entry as everybody else. So they would just have to navigate the drive and then go straight into the entry.
But one of the key things to consider though is when we're doing the Pioneer Widening Project. So with the Pioneer Widening Project, at the old 50th, so the old private roadway there, that's currently the way that you get into the project site, and it's still the way that those neighbors get in, that will actually be a multimodal path. So they're not coming in off of the road, they're coming off of that, which is actually separated from Discovery Drive. So if you're riding your bike on Pioneer, you would cut before that roundabout, you would cut north into the site, and then there are trails that would be on the south side of the building going around to the west of the building, connecting us to the west.
So what's tagged as being like the lower level access to equipment rooms, that west side that's on the opposite side of the parking lot, that's where we would have bikes coming up through?
So when you are looking at,
I've been stuck, like my reference point has been on slide 13 in our packet.
can you go to slide 13, please?
Well, at least what's 13 in our packet? Stop.
That one. No. There you
That.
go.
Yeah, so the trail that Steve is referencing runs along the south side or the bottom of that image. It's kind of off the green area.
Okay.
And then as you get around to the west, it curves and goes north. We have an access path from that ramp that ramps up to the south side of the building, and then you could loop around on the sidewalk to go north to get to the main entry.
So does that go all uphill then from the bike path, or are you just going straight uphill to get to the community center?
No, it's a ramp that, so it's like an ADA style ramp, so it's a shallow ramp, but yeah, it's uphill.
From the bike path?
There. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to cut to the short of it, my bigger concern is, I see where the main entry is, and, it's one thing to go and drive in and park your car and walk in, but when people on bikes, it's more of a challenge, and it can create a safety issue for everybody. And I just want to make sure that we're not expecting cyclists, kids, adults, whoever, to have to navigate all the way to a bike rack that's on the main entry, but in order to get there, you gotta weave your way through a parking lot, because, that is just a concern from a design perspective.
So just to clarify that a little bit, there is a pedestrian path that comes from the road and from the path we just talked about. So if they were uncomfortable being on the road, they could be on the sidewalk as well, just to clarify.
But we can certainly look at that as far as like the design coming into the site and assuring that there are multiple access points for multimodal, because certainly not only are we seeking LEED certification for the building at the council's direction, but also for the site. So integrating the site into the building into the site and people into the site is important. So we'll make sure we look at that as far as providing multiple access points for multimodal.
What is the approximate setback from Pioneer to, I guess, that first retaining wall? What are we looking at? What for distance right there?
On the south side
Yeah.
from Pioneer, I don't know the exact dimension, but it's past the setback and the gravel access that's there now, so it's got to be 80 feet-ish.
Sure. Okay.
So I guess if you can go up to slide 19, please. So I guess where I really started thinking about this, no, I think that one's, yeah, that's fine. One more, please. Yeah, so if you look, and maybe this is just how the rendering is, and that's not how it'll be in practice, but I look at that as saying, okay, if you're curling up and you're on the left side, you're not immediately getting to that sidewalk buffer between the building and those parking spots at the top. So if you're riding a bike in there, like, your only option is to run where cars are potentially backing out and everything. It was when I saw that, and I'm like, don't like that. Do we have another plan for bikes?
Okay.
So just walking you through where my mind went as I saw that, as somebody that, I mean, I live half a mile from, and I probably will ride my bike there all the time, and so.
Or there'll be teenagers that are
And
riding
there's
back there.
ideally
Yeah.
teenagers,
Yeah.
smaller kids, families and whatever, and I just don't want the expectation to be, oh, we've designed it so that in order to get to the bike rack, they've got to go through where cars are backing out.
Okay. We'll definitely look at some options for that. Thank you.
In terms of the design, I feel like it's so much different than anything else that we've built in Ridgefield. It doesn't really match. So I've never liked a modern look anyway. So I am also concerned about the glass in the gym. Are they going to be tinted? Because when you're working out on a treadmill and you're looking out sunset and sun rising, sun glaring right in your face, is there a plan to mitigate out the glare?
So they will have some tinting on them that will mitigate that slightly. But yeah, if there is sun directly coming in and you're looking at it, you would have sun in your eyes.
Right. So if you put a shade down, it defeats the purpose of working out in front of a window.
We can look
Right.
at that as far as
Yeah.
window tint. There are coatings that you
Right.
can use that reduce glare, so we can certainly
Okay.
look at that.
Yeah. How many, I'm gonna go back to the parking lot real quick, and this might be too far in advance, but how many parking spots will be handicap accessible? And would we be able to include expected mother parking into this parking lot?
Good question. So the site plan we have there does not show handicap parking, but we have about 10 stalls.
Out of 121?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's based on the development code. We're meeting that requirement. We also, just as a side to that, we do have electric vehicle plug-ins. We, at this point, have not designated anything for expectant mothers, but we could work with the city to figure that out.
Yeah, we can certainly look at options, whether it's expected mother or, I mean, there's lots of options.
Family
There's
parking.
elderly, veterans, expected mothers. There's lots of
Yeah.
different options that different types of commercial facilities use for specialized parking. So we can bring you ideas.
So did I hear that there's 121 parking spots?
That's what I counted.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and do we have any studies or comparisons of how many users are gonna be there versus how many parking spots that we have in place?
Well, yes and no. So we do know how many, we base everything on code requirements on the IBC. So the occupant load is based on what the code tells us, and then we provide parking based on that same occupant load as a ratio. We have also worked with the YMCA and said, hey, just based on your general use and your other facilities, is this enough parking? And they've agreed that this should be sufficient for their purposes.
I've always got a negative comment. No. The design. I know we've accepted the design.
No.
We haven't designed
No,
on the
sir.
building?
That is part of what we're doing as far as like the
Okay.
design for the building. We're at the right time to
Okay.
have ideas for that.
Okay. What I was gonna say is we're deviating from our normal pattern we have with post and beam. I have not seen anything of the entrance, what it looks like, but the beams is something that we've stressed.
Go back to the natatorium. Keep going. There. So, well, other one. There you go. So if you look at the natatorium, so the exposed wood beam as an element of our commercial design code is integrated into the natatorium on the west side, or on the west side, on the natatorium side of it. It is not, in this design, it's not integrated throughout. That is something we're looking for feedback on. So when you talk about the exposed wood beam as an element of what we do here, we do have that. That is integrated in there, and it's similar to what you see at the Rourke community building. Similar concept as far as that roof line and the exposed wood beam there, kind of matching that as a recreation center. But that's only one piece of it. So kind of back to, for both of you.
Okay. I was thinking maybe just for the entrance.
Yeah, we
a
do.
cupola type.
We do use the same language as the natatorium at the main entry roof. It's got the sloped roof with the big overhang and the exposed wood beams.
I still think we need an A-frame.
There. If you see, Counselor, if you see, and it's a little hard to see,
Yeah.
but on the right side of the building there,
Yeah.
that's where the entrance is, and you can kind of see that exposed wood beam.
Does the custom cuts of glass in this modern look make this more expensive? Like, could we look at other models that kind of flow with the other structures that we have in Ridgefield that might be able to reduce cost if we don't have specialized cuts?
It's not there's a minor cost increase because of that. But it is a different aesthetic choice that we could easily make it a more traditional look by squaring them off.
I prefer a more traditional look because it flows with everything else that we have. I feel like this kind of looks out of place, but again, I am just one person and I have strong opinions.
Yeah. No, this is great feedback. So like others on that, and if you could go to, keep going, there.
I like it.
So that's that side of it. One more, sorry. No, almost. Oh, sorry, it was, I feel like we're going, yeah, it was. There, right there. Okay, so that gives you kind of a sense of the more traditional squared off windows for the natatorium, but then it does have those kind of the geometric shapes there of the windows. So other thoughts, other feelings, I heard a couple of different comments on that.
I'm sorry, I really like it. I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Counselors, Councilor Hamilton.
I feel kind of neutral about it. I'm trying to figure out how I feel. I think that I don't mind the modern look, but it almost looks like two different, sorry, I clear my throat. It almost looks like two different things pushed together. Like the cohesion of the design, it looks nice. I think it looks good, but it feels like that part is like really out, the funky part and the traditional part. So I can't quite figure out if I like it or not, is what I'm saying. So that's not helpful, sorry.
No, that is helpful.
I really like the look I'm looking at right now. Just a comment, with all of the people I've spoken to in the community about this facility, none of them have raised any concern regarding what the exterior looks like. What are they concerned about? When does the pool show up? When can I go swimming? Are we going to have a basketball court? They could give two hoots regarding what this looks like. All they want is they want a why. I think this works perfectly. I think it makes a real statement for our city. Something unique, something different. Thank you.
Councilor Davis, and I have a comment after that.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I like it. I mean, I think that my standard is, I don't want to do something that's so outrageous where it's like in 10 years they can be like, oh, well, you could tell that was built in 2028, or you know what I mean? Something that was such a sign of the times. And to be honest with you, I'm not in that world of the depth that obviously you guys are, and so I don't know if there are elements in there that would hit that standard. I think that inevitably you are going to have telltale signs of like generational design, right? We can all tell that the Marshall Center, when you go to Vancouver, wasn't built 10 years ago. You just know. And so that there is a degree of inevitability. I just don't want it to make it so obvious. I like the fact that we are utilizing a mix of glass and timber. I agree that that a lot of the design elements match what has been done at Rourke. If I would not be opposed to more exposed timber, like post and beam, I wouldn't be offended by that at all. If anything, I've thought, are we giving ourselves any opportunities, even though this isn't the core purpose of it, to add more outdoor recreational options? I'm looking at that spot and I'm like, well, that little patch of grass, you might be able to have like a little kids class out there, but could you add a soccer field or something like that? And so I don't want to get too far off the path for that. But as far as design, I just don't want to do anything where it's like clearly it's dating it.
I guess looking at this, share some of those sentiments. I always feel like if we're going to spend $35-40 million on a facility like this that's right near the entrance to our city, you also want to make a statement, right? Like it's also, this has been a big vision for this community for a long time. So why not go big and make sure that it's making a statement? I love the look of it so far. Now I have a design in a creative side of like background, and one of the things we've always done is, we always talk about is that exact same thing. It's like, how do you design something that will not age poorly, right? And you're always trying to find that medium. You can go really high design, really trendy, or you can go very conservative and it looks kind of boring. But from you, I don't do architecture. So from your standpoint as designers, how do you approach this? What is that medium did you look for? Like as far as a design like this, where's that on that spectrum as far as very, very trendy design that could age quickly and maybe, it's definitely not conservative, so it's probably somewhere in the middle, but I'd be curious to hear from you on that.
That's a great question. So what we tend to do in our designs, two things is, one, we want to make sure it reflects the community and their goals and aspirations is the utmost thing. Second is we try to make best use of the construction materials that we're using. So one of the reasons why the natatorium has more of the squared off windows is because the best construction type for a natatorium that has an indoor environment that's caustic, right? It has a lot high humidity, very hot. The best construction there is CMU. And CMU is best suited to nice square openings that are on a CMU module. So those windows are kind of responding to the construction of that area. Whereas over on the fitness side, we don't necessarily have those constraints, right? It's more of a normal kind of construction that you save a little bit of money if you have a square window, but you're talking pennies on a angled window. One of the things that we have found from a design, just getting into high-level design, is nowadays it's all about providing people an opportunity to photograph themselves or their friends. And so part of it is like looking to create those opportunities so that people post things about those going there, right? And so part of it, when you look at the track and looking out those angled windows, how many people are going to have that photo of themselves standing on that track looking out the window and their friend outside taking a picture of them?
Yeah.
Right? So there's kind of trying to respond to modern trends and modern things. Whether that's going to date the building in 50 years or not, hard to say. I don't know. I would say that the level of the types of materials we use is more likely to date the building than necessarily the shape of the windows. You know, using trendy materials that aren't getting used in 20 years is more likely to date the building.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that's a good answer.
Looking at this now with your comments, I appreciate, I don't know who said, you know, it's like a mishmash or a combination of the exposed beam and then, you know, the modern. The building is very large, and to do exposed beam across the 40,000 square feet is, it can be done, but it's just very large and there's a cost aspect to it.
Sure.
One failure I think we've done here tonight is we didn't have a close-up, I don't think we do, of the main entry. No. I think a lot of when you interact with the building, not necessarily from the farthest parking spot, but when you get to the building and to the doors, you have that aesthetic with the exposed beams. And so
yeah.
I think we're there. We just might not have illustrated it very well.
I like the comments from the architect. I, like Megan, didn't like that blank wall, but understanding now with the glass, I thought we needed some of the other glass or something to break the wall up. It's kind of like our houses. We turned around and made them put trim around the windows. They were just plain windows before, and over time we've progressed that way. But I didn't realize that you have a condensation or a problem, and the oddball windows don't work out as well. I mean, well,
The triangle windows, got it.
Hey, I'm just a farmer. I'm not an architect. But if you want to cut the horns off the cow, I'll bet you I can do it better than you can.
100%. I'll go back and say I love the windows, the shape of the windows. I think it's a really neat touch. It looks like it's very, like, keeps it from being too, you know, I'll use this analogy. If you ever go up to the Capitol campus in Olympia, you can tell when certain buildings were built, right? There's very, very beautiful buildings. There's some buildings that were built that just look boring. I just wish they'd tear them down and start over because they're just ugly. I don't ever want to have an ugly building in our city. I like the intention behind that, and I think that what you guys did there is a really nice touch, and so I do hope we keep those.
Anything else about the building or the site? And I appreciate the insights and two aspects of this visually that we really haven't gone into. One of them is the entrance, kind of that grand entrance, and we'll work on visualizations to get you have you come into the building visually. The second one is the site, and it doesn't really go deep into that as far as how we get into and out of the site and how we're interacting with that. Other things that you want to see on that. Okay, then if not, let's go inside the building. All right, so this is the lower level floor plan, and I'm going to ask Julie to zoom it. Let's start from the top. So this is the lower level. Now, we're not entering on the lower level. We're entering on the upper floor, and so I probably should have flipped the script and had that slide go first, but you enter the building on the top floor. So when you're entering on the top floor, you then would go to, actually go to the next slide, because I do want to do that, because it's just easier to think about from like, this is how I'm going to enter the building. All right, let's start there. And start at the top, please. And start at the entrance and the lobby. There you go. Perfect. So if you look at the top there, the vestibule and the lobby, the grand entrance, this two-story entrance, and the interesting part of that is twofold. The first is, can you all see lobby there now? Okay, good. All right, so when you're looking at the lobby, there are actually two different entrances that go in from the lobby. So there's one, don't go too far, thank you. There's one main entrance, a grand entrance that everybody goes in. But once you get in, you have options to where you're going to go. You have an option to go, in this picture, down, and go into the community center. So the community center with a reception area, and then we'll go into the actual aspects of that. So I can go into the community center, or I can go right, and I can check in at the recreation center. Now, why have two different check-ins? Because of how we are designing this structure. We're actually designing two different assets with a zero lot line between them. So it's actually two different parcels, two different buildings, two different monetized assets that could be owned by two different parties, where the city and our residents could own the community center but not own the recreation center, and that each owner would have a independently functional building. They could be built separately, they could be built together, but when they are built, for the purposes of someone coming in, it's seamless. It's someone coming in, they come into this grand entrance, and they're like, I'm going to work out, I go this way, I am going to a community center function, or I'm going to a cooking class, I'm going this way. So ultimately, it sets up as a seamless venture. Now, one of the key pieces for management of that is to figure out how do you make sure that you have optimized the managerial piece of it. So when I go in that door, I have somebody I'm talking to, I'm looking at that, I'm like, where am I going here? So that's why you have a relatively broad, wide entrance into the check-in and reception areas, so that if it is built together, that you could have a single person or people working at a desk to help people get to the right spot. So that's why that was built that way, is for both functionality and the opportunity to have two separate buildings. Mayor.
So looking at this, like that lounge area on the community center is fairly large, right?
It is.
And I go back to our trip to Eugene, and you know, they had this really cool lounge area, you know, is kind of more longer. But is that sort of the same vision, having something like that, like a true lounge area, you know, where they even incorporated like local artists and murals, and they had the sitting area and stuff like that? Is that the idea?
That is a lot of it. A lot of the vision, though, for what happens in these spaces is yet to come.
Right.
It's the goal of the project team at this point in design is to develop the most flexible shell possible, with the key assets that the community has identified and has had over time that we want to replicate and recreate. So for your purpose on the lounge side of it, yes, it's saying, all right, do we have this large area that could be flexible? It could have a lot of different aspects in it. It could have art, it could have sitting, it could have a lot of different pieces to it, but it's flexible and it interacts with the other spaces around it. So you have that lounge that interacts with multi-purpose rooms just to the left of it in there. Now there is a short wall between the lounge and two of those small multi-purpose rooms. There's a short wall for a sink, for countertops, for if you have a multi-purpose room and you have people in there and they're having things going on, you need to have space where they can set things. You need to have a sink that they can actually wash their hands in. So there is some separation, but there is a lot of continuity built into this to be able to create the most flexible space possible, so that the community, you as a council, our community as a whole, can have the conversation of what do you want to do in that space. So it hasn't been decided. That's why when you look in these spaces, I don't have three-dimensional renderings of what's in there, because it hasn't been visioned yet. It hasn't been decided by the community. So that becomes one of the next big steps. So for the community center, if I'm walking in there and I go into that lounge area, it's all about, like, what are my flexible options? How do I maximize the flexibility and use of the space? Each one of the small multi-purpose rooms can actually be combined or separated with movable walls to be able to create larger or smaller spaces as necessary. And then if you look at, and then obviously restrooms, offices. Teen gaming was one that was set up as kind of a separated off space. Teen gaming, you can look at it as a multimedia space or however you want to. A lot of those spaces you want to have them at least with glass separated for noise purposes. So whether it is a gaming center, and we saw one in Eugene, we saw a kind of a gaming room which was pretty extensive and had a lot of different kind of gaming consoles or computers that were gaming computers. Set up for that, but a space for kind of teens, a teen space in there, which you do want to kind of set off a little bit just for noise purposes. And then the small and the large multi-purpose spaces then feed into the commercial kitchen. One of the key things that when we were working on a community center, when we started doing that work, the question was, what did we used to have in the community center that we no longer have? One of those things is a big commercial kitchen, but not just a commercial kitchen. It was Meals on Wheels. It was events and people actually preparing food and serving it for events in the community center. what else could there be that we didn't have before? And we could. That's where this kitchen comes in. This is actually a teaching kitchen. It's not just a commercial kitchen for the purposes of serving food or traying it up and sending it somewhere else. It's also giving the ability to actually teach classes. Having cooking classes, if you look, and it's kind of shadowed in there, but on the right side of the kitchen, you can see kind of what looks like a bench area. That's actually a stove. So it's a stovetop with countertops around it so that it's a display kitchen. So you're actually displaying out into the larger multi-purpose room that can open up or close. So you can close the kitchen off and have it separated and have just the kitchen, or when you're doing a cooking class, you can open that wall and actually do demonstrations, cooking demonstrations, so that the people that are actually out learning can be in that multi-purpose area learning from the people who are looking at them as opposed to looking away from them at a wall. So aspects of that we've seen at other facilities that, number one, create a lot of functionality and opportunity for everything from youth cooking classes to senior to family and everything in between. But it also gives an opportunity for flexibility for the kitchen itself, that you can use it for display, but you can also use that then for a food hub. One of the things that has been discussed over time in Ridgefield is the opportunity for local farmers around our area in our region having a place to be able to create value adds from their commodity crops. The simple is you grow berries, selling berries, you're making a very low price point, but if I make jelly or jam from those berries, now I can actually charge a higher price point and there is a value add. The issue that a lot of our small farmers have is they don't have commercial kitchens. They don't have commercial kitchens where they can actually do those value adds. They can't make the cucumbers into pickles or the berries into jams. These kinds of commercial kitchens are rare. They provide an opportunity that, again, feeds into who we are as a community and an opportunity to actually tie ourselves in with the surrounding rural areas. So those are a few aspects before I leave any of that on the community center feedback.
Just to clarify, this is ground level, right?
This is second story, but is how you enter. Think
enter.
like it's a daylight basement house, like because you're on a slope, right?
Yeah.
So I'm entering into that top level, and I'm entering right into this.
I got you. So the north parking lot is in the lower left-hand corner of this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm just wanting to verify, like, we're talking about the use of that kitchen. It's got the outside entrance and stuff like that. So if you were renting that out for that kind of purpose, they wouldn't have to go through the main vestibule.
Not at all.
I'm just thinking about the people that, if I'm renting one of the small multi-purpose things, but that's the only access into the kitchen or whatever it is, if we then are into a choice of you can only rent one or the other,
It's
or
not.
one has to be a package deal. Got it.
It's not. That was very conscious
Okay.
and intentional by the project team to develop a kitchen that, again, thinking about the uses, like Meals on Wheels. Like if Meals on Wheels was to use this kitchen, how would they get, they're making the food, they're getting it into the trays, they're putting it onto a truck. How does the truck get the food? So there is a direct entrance and parking area for loading and unloading.
And one more thing, I know you spoke to this, and I'm going to throw this out there, and I know you could make 100 different endless scenarios, but when I look at the teen gaming and it shares essentially a wall with the large multi-purpose, like if I'm teaching a cooking class, or if there is somebody that's doing maybe a wedding or something like that in that space, I want to know how thick that wall is between teen gaming as someone that spends their day with 13 and 14-year-olds. And whenever I let them engage in games, like that gets real loud real quick. And so that sharing a wall with a space that could be for you've got to have focus. Like that's just one of those things that I just want to be conscious of. Because I look at that and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I'd want to share a wall with that if I was doing something important.
The large multi-purpose room, what would the capacity of that room potentially be?
So it depends on how you set it up, whether it's rows of seating like this or tables like this, but that's where we have the wall shown there. That would be about the same as half of this room here. So I don't have an exact number, but that kind of gives you an idea of the size of the space. Yeah, if it's walled off, if just the 227 approximately is about half, would be about half this room. So if you combined all three of the multi-purpose rooms together, it would probably be 1.5 to, yeah.
Councilor Favela, you had, okay. Other questions on the community center side of it for right now, the design of that for right now?
Yeah, I will say, like, the idea of a teaching kitchen and what we saw in Eugene, and I know that not, like, only the city manager and I were in that room, but, you know, they had a smaller, I guess, would you classify it as was that a teaching kitchen? Sort of?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, we talked about that and it was a nicer kitchen, but, you know, having something like that, I think when I saw that, I thought there's a real value to having something like that there. Totally worth the investment, so I'm really glad to see that there's a larger one included in that space.
I do have something. Could you access the kitchen from inside of the building if all the multi-purpose rooms are being used, or do they have to only use the outside entrance?
So if you look just above the kitchen, there's that corridor
Right.
231. So you can enter through either that middle small multi-purpose room, or you can enter from the outside door, or the outside door on the bottom of the kitchen. So there's kind of 2 or 3 ways to get into the kitchen there.
Right, so if I'm cooking in the kitchen and I need to use the restroom, I have to go outside all the way around the building, come through the lounge to the bathroom, and then go back outside and go all the way around so that I don't interrupt whatever is going on in the meeting rooms that are occupied?
Correct.
Yeah, that sounds really inconvenient.
That's a good point.
So I think we should look at that.
Okay, we can look at some sort of corridor or something. The issue that we'll run into, and we'll look at it, the issue that we'll run into is anytime you put a corridor, and there was a corridor that we had looked at in one of the earlier designs, it takes away from some of the functional space, and it creates a hallway, which may be necessary still to actually have that, and then it kind of separates off so you don't get as much flex in it. But we'll look at different possible configurations.
Or including a restroom somewhere, like a small, you know what I mean, like a pocket restroom, so that they can have access to that maybe off of that corridor somewhere. There's a small...
Like by the data and electrical and
yeah,
mechanical
like there's
in
a
that
small
area?
pocket restroom just for the people who are utilizing the kitchen space if all of the multi-purpose rooms are in use.
Yeah, there's some flexibility in that gray space on the upper left there that we can look at. Good idea.
Looking at this also, you know, and I know that per what Mr. Stewart said, that the vision has yet to be determined from it. When you say the large multi-purpose room is roughly half of the size of this room, I'll be frank, I'm a little underwhelmed at that being the large size, because this isn't a super large room. And, you know, I would hope for it to be a little bit larger. And then I look at that compared to the lounge size, and it's hard for me to imagine without thinking what we'd do there. I know you know, looking at what Eugene had, which was a lounge, but it's very different. That's significantly, it looks like it's roughly the same size as like those 3 multi-purpose rooms together. Would it be worth it to extend the size of those multi-purpose rooms and reduce the size of the lounge?
We certainly could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of like preliminary rendering of what that would look like, or could you do that like kind of like the Minecraft version or something like that, that's kind of a little bit low fidelity, like, you know, it's just to kind of get an idea what the space looks like if you were to enter from the main entrance?
Yes, we could pull that together, yes.
Because, I mean, I'm thinking from an operational perspective, we would not really be in a position where we could solely rent out like the lounge or anything like that, because then you would miss out on access to every other space.
We can definitely look at that. That's a good point, and it's definitely a way to enhance the multi-purpose rooms. Okay. Anything else on this space? I'll start working my way over just a little bit.
I think we can work our way over.
Okay. So I want to go to the recreation center instead of the community center. We enter in, we check in, there's a reception area, offices. You can see the elevator and stairs right there by the entrance to provide easy access for people to be able to actually have access to that lower level as well. Men's and women's room on the upper floor. right there by the fitness and cardio area. On the lower level on that, on the north side of the building, you see the Y time. Again, the fitness and cardio is south side of that, so you get more of that southern exposure and you get the, more of the windows and the light on that. Wait, southern? That's not, no. That's on the east side. So on the east side of the building, sorry. The fitness and cardio on the east side has a lot of those windows and those transparencies, whereas the Y time, a lot of that is up against the natatorium, so not a lot of, like half of it has that exterior light and windows, but not as much as the fitness and cardio. So that's where the kids area, one of the things that came up earlier, the idea was at first to have like kids care area on the community center side. And it was actually the YMCA representatives saying that a lot of people, when they go to a Y, when they go to a recreation center, they want to drop their kids off, but they kind of still want to see where they're at. And they want to keep an eye on them and not be so far away from them that you're wondering if they're okay. So thus the connection between those. Then I'm on the track. This is an indoor track. I am above the gym. I'm walking around and I'm looking down at the gym. And so that's really the upper story there. A lot of open area for fitness and cardio, kind of a low wall as a divider between the fitness and cardio and the indoor track. Questions or comments on that? Pretty straightforward, yeah.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask this, but I made a note that just as we're talking about kids and all that, brought it in my mind. The market feasibility study was done in 2016. I think the amount of families that have moved to Ridgefield since then is quite a few. So I think when I was looking at that scale of like what's important in here, I think we need to make sure we're focusing on kids a little bit more than that study initially indicated. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Fair. All right, anything else right on this level? All right, let's get in the elevator, go on the stairs, and let's go downstairs. So the previous slide. Now zoom in, and I'm going to go from the elevator or stairs, so from the top. Okay, now we're on the lower level. So we had fitness area upstairs. Upstairs we have fitness and weights downstairs. So another fitness and weight area. As you come down the stairs, you're entering that, the weight, more free weights in that area, as well as that's where you would be getting off on the elevator. The locker rooms, women's, men's, and family lockers, so that you have a full set of those. The sizing of all of that, of how many lockers you need, rooms do you need, how many stalls, all of that has been a very conscious effort of the project team working with managers of these types of facilities to determine the sizing necessary for that. From there, you also then have the ability to go two different directions from the locker rooms. I go downstairs, I'm in the locker rooms, I go into the natatorium, or I go into the gym area. The gym area itself was interesting. What you see there is actually 3 smaller courts. It used to be 2 smaller courts and 1 big basketball court. When I say courts, 2 smaller basketball courts and 1 big basketball court. When we went to Eugene, one of the things that the Eugene YMCA director and the Clark County YMCA director indicated was if they were doing it over again, they wouldn't build a big basketball court. Because number 1, nobody uses it. Number 2, it takes up the entire gym, and so nothing else can happen. And that if you get away from that, instead of having 2 smaller courts, which kids want the smaller courts, and older people playing, and when I say older, I like me, and older, don't want to run on the long courts either. They want the shorter courts. Instead of 2 of them, you can get 3. And not only can you get 3 of those, but you can also get 4 pickleball courts in there. So you can actually get more pickleball courts in there, and you're creating a narrower space. You actually save a little bit of those square feet. So when we were talking about saving a couple of feet on either side, that's what's happening there. So that's gym. And that area, Mayor, you?
Yeah, I was getting ready to say something. So I remember this when we were in Eugene, and I remember the CEO, he was talking about that. I don't know if I fully agree, only because I'm coming at this as a parent we've done basketball, and the last couple of years what we find is we're doing community ed basketball, and we spend a lot of time in Woodland and Kalama and La Center because what we're told is that Ridgefield doesn't have a lot of facilities for basketball leagues. Now, I don't know if that's really the intent, that we would actually use this as a space to host basketball leagues. I played Y basketball when I was growing up, so my assumption is kind of there. But to do that and have 3 half courts, but not even have a full court, feels like we're...
They're not 3 half court. They're 3 shorter full courts. So
Okay.
if you look at it, like you see those are hoops. So
Yeah.
you see 6 hoops, right? So that's actually 3 full-size courts.
Right.
It's just they're not the huge full size, they're the youth size, and the smaller, the shorter full court. So instead of what you generally see when you see kids playing is they're playing the shorter full court. And so the other design had 2 of those. This has 3. So we
Okay.
actually get an extra one by not having one big full-size NBA-sized.
Right.
So is it a full court? Yes, it's not a half court.
Right, but for competitive purposes or league purposes, like you wouldn't do like league games on a smaller court, would you?
Yes.
You would?
Yeah. I've coached middle school basketball and we always played the shorter courts.
Right.
At
So
middle school.
where do parents who crowd in there go to watch games if there's 3 courts side by side?
I just attended a 6th grade basketball game in Battleground. They sat around the edges.
Right.
Everything was fine. There were 2 games going on at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. And they're 6th graders, so they didn't want the full-size basketball court.
Okay.
Stephen, what?
Yeah, in our discussions with the YMCA, what they generally do is they have portable low-rise bleachers that when they have a big event like a basketball tournament for middle school or whatever, they will wheel those in so that parents can sit on them around the courts. And then they also, second function for those is if they have some event going on in the pool area, they can then wheel those same bleachers
Okay.
out into the pool
Yeah.
area for the same purpose.
I'm not saying we should redesign it to accommodate leagues because I think that there's probably going to be a more frequent use to use it like this. But it's just a consideration, being a parent, having been there and trying to squeeze in the walls and try and watch games at other places where there's not a lot of space for parents to watch. Counselor Davis, you were going to say something?
I mean, I do have some, but yeah, I mean, just to kind of add a little something to that. So the school I teach at, we end up hosting a lot of basketball and volleyball just because it's the nicest element of our school, if I'm being honest, is our remodeled gym. And we have 2 of the short courts, but then horizontally in this, down the middle, we have the nice, thick, full court. And so that has been used, that orientation has been used for like if they need to bring in chairs, because you can't really do it between the courts like that. So, I mean, that might be an option. You get a little bit confusing with the striping, you know, so that would be a consideration. But I'm going to throw something maybe a little bit bigger out there. Like now since I swim, I go to LA Fitness, and every morning when I go in, the things that are filled are the racquetball courts. And I think that that's at least worth bringing up, is whether or not, and I'm not saying it has to be basketball court real estate that goes to that, but as someone that goes to a local gym regularly and sees the use, I mean, there's a lot of people that go in for those racket sports. And so I think it's worth mentioning that as a possible feature that people would use.
We can certainly look into that and see what opportunities there might be and where within the configuration that it might be able to be accomplished.
Okay.
Just real quick, as I'm getting my bearings here too, looking at this and seeing where the natatorium is, where the gym is, where we saw the, to quote Counselor Wells, funky windows. Like, is that where those windows are, is in the gym? Or, yeah,
Correct. The oddball windows are
oddball windows.
in the gym. So on what would be the top of the page, because of the grading, they're actually up above the track.
Okay,
And then as you kind of come down, what would be the right side of the page and the bottom of the page, they get lower and come down below the track.
Okay.
So they let light in down at the lower level.
cool, okay, very cool.
Counselor Favela, you had?
In the restrooms, are there steam showers or saunas?
We haven't gotten into that detail yet with
Can we
the,
add
with them.
that as a, not shared, so a separate, okay,
understood.
thank you.
Yeah.
Some athletic clubs have a shared sauna and steam shower, so I'm requesting separate, it's an outdated model at some clubs, so I would like, separate.
We can definitely look at that. Okay, let's go into the natatorium then. If there's nothing else on the gym side, so move down just a little bit. So now I'm going into that natatorium. The question as far as the, has been raised as far as like, where am I gonna sit? If we have, like, that's a 6-lane lap pool right there. That's a 6-lane cold water lap pool, full size, able to be used for high schools or anybody else who wanted to actually have competitive swim in there. Similar to what the Clark County YMCA has. That actually does have room built into it for low-level bleachers that are movable, that could be used for both basketball tournaments, pickleball tournaments in the gym, or in the natatorium itself. The recreation pool, we don't have the three-dimensional on this one, but you've seen it before. The picture that we have shown before from 2022 forward has maintained, which is the recreation pool, 0 entry, warmer water, lap area, but more for children and for swim lessons, a splash area in that 0 entry area, but really integrated more for families, and then the lap pool programmed for those more competitive activities. I will say we have seen examples of natatoriums that have both the lap pool and recreation pool being used by swim teams, by competitive swim teams, where they'll have the younger kids in the recreation pool learning, doing basic stroke development and starting, and then the lap pool is for the more advanced swimmers in there. Obviously, there's storage, equipment, all kinds of things associated with the natatorium as well.
So as someone that's, I guess, still in this world, one, this is a pretty easy one to add. I would add a couple of storage closets, maybe off of like the pool equipment, like not that whole space.
Now, look to the north, pool storage.
I'm not talking about a space that big. I'm talking about more like really like just closet stuff. So on the swim team side, so where I coach, it's at Cascade, and we have high school swimming there, but there's also club swimming there. In both entities, I mean, they have to literally, there's a tough shed that's been put on the deck because there's no locked storage, just for team equipment.
I think that literally is
Fins.
why the pool storage room was created.
Okay, I mean,
Because that's
I
not
just
pool equipment. Pool equipment is the
Yeah.
stuff that you would need to actually keep things. Pool storage is exactly what you're talking about.
I just
I think what he means
Yeah.
is designated spots, so if club
Yes.
and school.
So like a locker for private clubs to use?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you. So that's exactly what I'm talking about is, if this is going to be operated by the YMCA, they're going to have elements, whether it's in pool storage or pool equipment, that they're going to want to store. But if they are subbing out, like the Clark County YMCA has the Tornadoes, the Tornadoes either have or they would like to have, I can guarantee, a little locking closet so they can, access, pull buoys and, kickboards and stuff like that they have purchased, sometimes shirts. And
So there's
stuff
lots of
like that.
space for that. We could simply separate the space off and
That's
have
what I'm saying.
lockers contained within
Yeah.
that, but the space is there for that. So
Yeah, oh,
we can
absolutely.
definitely look at parcelizing that.
That's all I was
Yeah.
recommending, was just kind of creating some of those storage locker, storage rooms
Sure.
for that. Yeah.
I know it doesn't show on here and it might be too in the weeds, but will the recreation pool have accessible chairs for children and families to use for handicapped children? Or wheelchair?
Yeah, so it is wheelchair accessible. We also are planning for lifts for to lift people into deeper sections of the pool, or just allow a second access point for them.
Okay, good.
Thank you, both. Great question on that. Any other kind of the design elements of the natatorium or any of that area? Okay, we've gone through the design. I appreciate the latitude, and I know we've taken a little bit more time on this, so I appreciate you walking through that. So we'll go to the next. We have just a couple of final slides. So with the changes, thank you. So with the changes that were made, the cost deductions with the reorientation of the site and the other cost deductions that we had spoken to, the current estimated construction cost with those deductions is back down to approximately $35 million. So we brought it back down to where we had anticipated we needed it about a year ago. Now, these change over time. You've seen that. We talked about that. So that's something we're going to continually have to come back to you and readdress as we get closer to our construction timeline, which is next. And that's that. So this is where we are currently in the design process. You see schematic design at the top. That's January, February, March, and April of 2025. I just made that. That's now mine. And you see schematic design and design development both have a little one beside them in superscript. If you look at the bottom, that has included a lot of regular project team meetings with city staff, with ACI. The question was asked, are we working with the project team for the widening project? Yes, there are regular meetings that are going on there, and with YMCA staff. We are now approaching the end of design development. That's why we wanted to come talk with you. Let's make sure we have those design elements locked in that you see as beneficial to the community. Appreciate the feedback. We will integrate it. Once that is finalized, we go into creating construction documents and our permitting processes. Permitting processes have already started. We are beginning the conversations with community development to be doing land use review so that will be done before the end of this year. Same thing with building permits, that will be next. We do land use, then engineering, then building. So land use engineering going on soon and, well, getting started on it now really. And then having that done by the end of the year, have building permits in place. By late fall of this year, we want to be developing and finalizing, bringing to you project partner agreements for the project, and then getting into construction by 2026. By the beginning of 2026, start the mobilization, the bidding process that we go out and are done by March, April of next year. We're completing the bids, and then we're moving to construction by May of next year. The timeline for construction, it's approximately a 16-month build time frame, which would have us open in summer of 2027. So that's where we are on the project timeline as of today, with all the work that is already is underway, has already been completed, and that we expect to be completed over the next year. Any questions about the timeline?
When the construction documents are complete on that, would they be available for submitting individually for some contractors to take a look at them, far as price points?
Yeah, it'll be going out for public bid. So they'll be publicly available and general contractors and subcontractors can bid on them.
And so that's in December of this year.
It would probably go out we will be done with the documents in December, but we probably won't bid until the January, February timeframe, because that's generally when contractors are looking for their work to start work in the spring and following year.
Can you tell me a little bit about, like, we spent a good deal of time on the interior and some of the amenities, especially on the community center side. How does that impact costs? Is that just kind of factored in? It's pretty nominal, or like, Councilor Favela was talking about having two different saunas, or, something like that. Where does that factor into the cost and for this whole thing? And do we still look at what we're looking at for the numbers you put on the screen, $35 million, and it's minimal to kind of put those types of things in there?
Kind of. So we always work to get back to that 35 million range. And so we have a cost estimator on board that at the end of each phase will redo a cost estimate or do a new cost estimate so that we can verify that we're always working to that 35 million mark. So whenever we add something, we always look at, okay, what can we pull away to offset that cost? Or we have the conversation of, is it worth the increased cost to add this element in there and not take something away? And we just have those conversations, but we're always striving to get back to that, stay within that 35 million.
And some of it's on the construction side, some of it would be tenant improvements that would be included as part of tenant improvements. So some of the things that we're talking about, like some of the things we're talking, whether it's saunas and steam room or lockers, those kinds of things may end up being part of the construction piece of it, or they may end up being TIs that get integrated into the actual internal development from whoever it is that is owning and managing the facility itself.
Gotcha.
So
Okay, yeah.
for the purposes of the community center, so when we look at it, we say, okay, well, here's the structural design with a lot of flexibility, but what is in the lounge? What is in the kitchen? What are those aspects of? Those become tenant improvements.
Okay, yeah.
And those are extra costs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Council, any other questions at this point? Doesn't look like we have any, okay.
So that is what we had for you today. We had for the council discussion, the design, the timeline questions. You've asked questions throughout, which we very much appreciate. We've taken down your design feedback. We'll integrate that and show you some renderings to make sure that we are hitting on that before we finalize. Is there anything else, though, that we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure that we touch base on today?
Not as far as design or timeline. Doesn't sound like, no.
Perfect. Well, that's all we had for you today. Thank
Okay.
you very much, council. Appreciate
Great,
it.
thank you very much. We'll adjourn the study session. Thank you.